Welcome to the shadows. This is MrsSinister, where terrifying tales lull you to sleep. Lawrence had always wanted a stable job. After months of training, certification, and finally getting accepted into a security agency, he felt something close to pride when he wore his uniform for the first time. It was clean, stiff, with a faint smell of new fabric and bleach. His wife took pictures of him, smiling at how he looked, serious, responsible, and finally, with a role that mattered. His first assignment didn't sound prestigious, but he didn't care. A job was a job. He was to guard an old commercial building set to be demolished in a few months. It wasn't in the best part of town, but it wasn't too far either. A few stores and businesses used to thrive there decades ago, but since then, time had drained it of activity and life. Now it was just a concrete skeleton at the edge of a highway. The instructions were simple. Stay at the guard post from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Bring your own supplies and make hourly rounds. The agency said the area was often used by squatters and suspicious individuals, so his role was simply to provide presence, to make the place uninviting. The building was surrounded by a high rusted fence with one entry point, and a small security office made of concrete and thin metal sheets sat near the gate. That tiny room was now Lawrence's world. His wife made sure he had packed everything: food, snacks, water, coffee sachets, and a flashlight. He also brought his phone and power bank. When he finally sat in the booth on his first night, the sun had just finished dying behind the broken rooftop. The building was dark and silent, its windows like eyes that had forgotten how to blink. The first few hours were uneventful. He had eaten some pork stew and rice, drank warm coffee, and watched YouTube videos on his phone with his earphones plugged in. The occasional motorcycle passed on the highway nearby, but other than that, he was alone with the sound of insects and wind. It was around 2:07 a.m. when he noticed the buzzing. Not a mechanical buzz, more like the sound a broken intercom or electric shaver makes, something inconsistent and dying. He took off one of his earphones and paused his video. The buzzing seemed to come from inside the building, or maybe just beyond the gate. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out. The air was cold, and the moon was covered with a thin sheet of clouds. He walked slowly, pointing the light at the concrete pathway leading up to the entrance. Nothing. No movement, no people, no sign of anyone or anything. He checked the side walls, the corners near the dumpsters, even behind the small transformer box by the fence. There was nothing unusual. The buzzing stopped. Maybe it was just a weird power line or a neighbor's device. Shrugging, he returned to his booth and resumed his night. By sunrise, he was already too tired to remember it properly. A minor annoyance, he thought. On the second night, the buzzing came again. Same time, same strange broken sound. This time it came with a faint clicking, like knuckles cracking behind walls. Again, he walked out with his flashlight. He was half expecting someone hiding, maybe teenagers or drug users pulling a prank. He shouted once, but there was no reply. His flashlight caught nothing but metal, shadow, and silence. The buzzing stopped as soon as he reached the middle of the path. He stood there for a few moments, listening. The clicking was gone too. He scanned around one more time and went back inside. The next morning, he mentioned the buzzing to his wife. She had a strange look on her face and quietly told him that she had heard stories about that building. Years ago, when she was still in school, there were whispers about how the place was cursed. A man was found hanging in one of the storage rooms, an accident or a suicide. Nobody really knew. After that, tenants began to leave one by one. The electricity would flicker randomly. Strange noises were heard, and one janitor went missing during a late-night shift, never found again. Rumors spread quickly, and eventually, no one wanted the building anymore. The owners decided to demolish it, not because it was structurally unsound, but because it made people uncomfortable. Too many strange incidents, and too many bad memories. Lawrence brushed it off, but deep inside, unease crawled into his chest. He didn't believe in ghosts or curses, but he did believe in crazy people who might be hiding in dark corners. His next shift started as usual. He brought extra snacks, determined to stay awake for the entire duration. It was his third night, and he already memorized the creaks of the floor, the squeak of the guard booth door, and the hiss of the nearby streetlight. But this time, the buzzing returned. Sharper, angrier, and accompanied by something else. Screams. They were faint at first, like cries from a distance. Not loud, but real. It sounded like a man screaming in pain or terror. Then another, higher-pitched one, like a woman screaming and crying at the same time. He bolted up and grabbed his flashlight again. He walked out to the gate and listened. The night was otherwise dead. No cars, no voices, no wind. Just that buzzing and those horrible, faraway screams. His legs trembled slightly, but he moved forward, trying to follow the sound. But it was everywhere, echoing, spinning around him, making it impossible to trace. Then the buzzing faded and the screaming ended, just like that. He returned to his post, sweating and nervous. He sat down heavily and pulled out his phone, hoping that some video or music might distract him. That's when he saw the notification, a message. The sender was unknown. The content was a photo, his own picture. It showed him sitting exactly where he was now, slouched slightly, looking at his phone, just before the buzzing started. The angle was from outside the booth, through the slightly open door. Whoever took it was close, real close. His stomach dropped, his breathing grew shallow. He looked outside, then at the dark around him. Fear stabbed at his throat. Someone had been watching him. Someone was playing with him. Not a ghost, a real person. Or so he thought. Suddenly, he heard laughter. Soft at first, but then louder, unbelievably loud. It wasn't coming from the outside anymore. It was inside his head. A shrieking, echoing laugh that felt like it was being screamed straight into his mind. He dropped his flashlight and clutched his ears. But it didn't stop. The sound scraped against his brain like metal claws. He shouted but heard nothing except that horrible laugh, which now sounded like it was coming from multiple mouths. Each one slightly off, slightly slower, slightly more distorted. It was unbearable. Then it stopped. Silence returned, heavier than ever. Lawrence sat shaking in the chair, too afraid to move. Tears blurred his vision. His phone buzzed again. He froze. Not another photo. Not another laugh. He almost couldn't bring himself to look. But it was a message from his wife. She asked how he was. He replied quickly, explaining what just happened in rapid, broken sentences. She didn't reply, but a few minutes later, his phone rang. It was her. She said she had called his supervisor. The supervisor arrived an hour later. Lawrence was pale, sweating, and visibly shaken. But he couldn't find the photo anymore. It had vanished from his messages. There was no trace of it. The screams, the buzzing, the laughter, gone. The supervisor stayed with him until sunrise, and Lawrence finished his shift without incident. After that night, the agency changed his schedule. They assigned him to the same building, but only during the day. Someone else took the graveyard shift. Lawrence never met that replacement, and he never asked. He was just relieved. In 2 months, the demolition crew arrived and tore the building down, piece by piece, wall by wall, until nothing but dust and rebar remained. Lawrence never found out what caused the buzzing, or the laughter, or the screams. The photo of himself watching his screen, taken from the shadows, was gone, erased without a trace. Sometimes, late at night, when he's at a different post in a different place, he thinks he hears the faint echo of laughter in the distance. Fenn knew the job wouldn't be easy, but he took it anyway. It was a temporary gig, a fill-in shift for a guard who'd gotten sick. Just a few weeks, the agency said. Watch the school at night. Make the rounds. Sign the log. Go home. It was routine work for someone like him, a man who'd done dozens of these night shifts across warehouses, banks, and sleepy offices. He needed the money. His mother's hospital bills were piling up like trash no one bothered to take out, and the school offered a little more than the usual rate. The fact that it was a massive campus didn't faze him. He'd worked in bigger places. On his first night, the school felt like any other building after dark. Too still, too wide, and too quiet. The hallway lights flickered when they bothered to turn on. The echo of his own footsteps followed him like ghosts with nowhere else to go. He had brought his usual kit: flashlight, energy drinks, a pack of crackers, and a cheap but reliable radio. The guards before him had left him notes, door codes, circuit breaker switches, and the standard logbook instructions. Everything seemed in order, but something wasn't. It started subtly, a faint sound, like a buzzing, around 2 a.m. on his first shift. Fenn had just finished checking the back perimeter near the gymnasium and was heading to the second floor. He paused when he heard it, a low vibration, more like an insect hum than static, floating in the air like a mosquito that never landed. He turned off his radio. Still there. He listened. It vanished. He brushed it off, thinking it might have been from a flickering bulb or the building settling. The next night it returned. Same time, same sound. Still faint, still strange, but this time accompanied by something else, something distant. A thud, then a shuffle, then silence. Fenn shined his flashlight through the glass windows and doors, sweeping the gardens and outer edges. Nothing. He went back to his post and let the night pass, trying not to think about it. The third night changed everything. At 2 a.m., he was doing his round on the second floor, walking along the corridor with long rows of windows that overlooked the neighboring residential area. The streetlights were mostly dead, save for one flickering yellow light that barely lit the sidewalk. In the distance, just beyond the chain-link fence that marked the school's property, There was a small, squat house, the kind you'd mistake for abandoned, if not for the presence of a wild garden that looked like it had never been trimmed. Broken pots, tangled vines, and a clothesline with nothing hanging on it. Fen paused. From that house, he heard something. At first, just muffled yelling. A human voice, strained and angry, like someone yelling at a child or a pet. Then, crying, female. It was distant, but not faint. The windows were thin, and he heard the sobs as if they were inside the building with him. He moved closer to the window, squinting into the darkness. There was no light from the house. The garden didn't move. Still, the crying continued. Then, silence. He stood there, frozen, then forced himself to look away, to return to his round and report nothing. But the seed had been planted. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same voice. The cries escalated, became pleading, then screaming. It wasn't just a domestic fight. Fen was sure of that. Someone was being hurt. Badly. He could hear furniture being thrown, objects shattering. Then a terrible silence broken only by a high-pitched wail that lasted too long to be natural. He pulled out his phone. His fingers shook as he dialed the police. They arrived quickly. A patrol car. 2 officers. Fen met them at the gate, pointed at the house, explained what he'd heard. They looked at him, nodded, and crossed the road to check it out. Fen watched from the second floor as they entered the property, flashlights cutting through the darkness. They stayed inside the gate for only a few minutes before returning. One of them walked back to the school to speak to Fen. Calm voice, apologetic tone. The house, he said, had been abandoned for years. Nobody lived there. No electricity. No running water. Probably squatters at best, but they saw no sign of anyone. They just made the check to be thorough. It wasn't the first time they got a call about the place. Fen froze. The guard he was covering for. He had made the same call. The police left, promising to keep an eye on the house. Fen stood alone on the second floor, the buzzing sound returning in the walls. It crawled under his skin now, agitating him like invisible ants. His palms were slick with sweat. He finished his round and stayed at his post for the rest of the night, headphones on, volume loud, trying to ignore the hum, the memory of the screaming. He didn't quit. He needed the money. He borrowed noise-canceling headphones from a friend the next day. They helped. The first night using them, he heard nothing. Just the hum of the music app and the crackle of synthetic beats. But when he took them off, his ears felt raw, as if something had been clawing at them in his absence. Still, it worked. He finished his shift to visit his mother, who smiled at him weakly from the hospital bed and asked if he was sleeping enough. He lied, said everything was fine. The storm was relentless. It had arrived earlier than the forecasts warned, howling like a beast in pain and turning the streets of downtown into wide, angry canals. The wind had a voice, sharp and unmerciful, stripping trees of their dignity and battering homes until windows gave up. Floodwaters rose fast, swallowing cars, stores, sidewalks. People ran wherever they could, scrambling for higher ground, empty condos, government buildings, and even the parking lots that had the rare blessing of elevation. South Blue Parking, a tall, concrete structure on the edge of a luxury commercial strip, was usually the kind of place where you paid too much to keep your sports car out of the sun. But tonight, it became a beacon. Its flat gray form, towering 6 floors high with an open-air top, was one of the few places untouched by the rising waters. Johann didn't think he'd be working a double shift. He'd been stationed since 8 a.m., expecting Joe, the night guard, to come in around 6. But when Joe called, his voice was hoarse with panic. The roads were rivers, Joe said. The water was chest-high in some parts, neck-high in others. Impossible to reach the parking lot. Johann was stuck, and he accepted it without anger. He couldn't go home either, not through that kind of flood, and it was too dangerous to try. His wife had texted earlier that she was safe, up in their small apartment, and that gave him some comfort. Besides, the owner had ordered him to keep the lot open, free for anyone who could make it there. No IDs, no fee, just get the cars off the street. They came quickly. Slick black SUVs, compact sedans with plates from all over the region, even one truck carrying a delivery vehicle on its back. By nightfall, the parking lot was packed from the basement to the top floor. Some people stayed in their cars for a bit, but when the wind shook the building, most decided it was best to go elsewhere, somewhere with 4 walls, a roof, and no echoes. By 11 p.m., Johann was alone. He stayed in the guard station near the entrance ramp. A small fluorescent bulb gave off a tired light, casting yellow shadows over the chipped desk and old electric fan. The power had gone out twice already, but the backup generator had kicked in, just enough to keep the lights on and the boom gate working. He had a bag of rice crackers, 2 sandwiches his wife had packed in the morning, and a thermos of now lukewarm coffee. He kept his phone close, scrolling through storm updates, watching videos of flooded malls, collapsed billboards, and panicked anchors in yellow raincoats. It was almost peaceful in a strange way, just the sound of rain on concrete and the occasional rumble of thunder. Then, at 2:14 a.m., one of the car alarms went off. A sharp, pulsing wail echoed up and down the structure. Johann flinched, stood up, and cursed softly under his breath. It was on the 4th floor, that much he could tell from the acoustics. He grabbed his flashlight and started climbing the stairs. The elevator had been out of service for months. The light from his torch cut through the damp air as he ascended, the concrete walls cool and sweating. By the time he reached the 4th floor, the alarm had stopped. He looked around. Rows of cars, tightly packed, metal wet from wind-blown rain. He walked slowly between them, shining the light into windshields, under tires, through windows. Nothing unusual. Maybe it was a false alarm, a glitch, or maybe someone had leaned on a key fob. It happened. He went back down, but 30 minutes later, it happened again. This time, he rushed up the stairs. And again, by the time he reached the 4th level, silence, stillness, just a line of slumbering vehicles, headlights dimmed, windows fogged. But something didn't sit right. As he swept his flashlight across the lot, he thought he saw movement inside a silver sedan. Just the briefest flicker, like someone ducking down. He approached the car, footsteps echoing, and knocked on the window. No answer. He tried the driver's side door. Locked. The interior was empty. Seats untouched. Seatbelt still clipped into place. He backed away. Something was off, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. He was tired. His eyes could be playing tricks. That happened during long shifts. Still, He decided to make a full round of the 4th floor. That's when he saw the shadow in the back seat of a black SUV 2 rows down. A figure sitting perfectly still. Johan's heart skipped. He took a step closer, then another. The figure didn't move. He gripped his flashlight like a weapon. But when he came within 5 meters, the SUV was empty. The seats glistened under the light, clean. No one there. He turned around and left quickly. Back in his station, he locked the door and sat in silence. His sandwich had gone stale. He stared at the rain beyond the guard post glass. Then he hears a faint crying from the level above. He bolted upright, turned on all the lights, stepped outside the station, and swept the parking lot with his flashlight. No one, nothing, just rain and flood, and his panicked breathing. Then he heard it again. The alarm. It sounded distorted now, warped. The usual shrill had a second layer, like static. He forced himself to go back up. His knees ached. The stairs felt longer than before. 4th floor. The alarm stopped. This time, the air felt heavy, like something had been waiting. He saw the figure again, inside a different car. This time, he didn't approach. He just watched, and then it turned to face him. There was no mistaking it now. Pale face, eyes wide and blank, mouth too big for a normal human expression. No breath fogged the window. Its head tilted slowly, jerky, not smooth, like a puppet pulled by unseen strings. He turned and ran. He didn't care about the cars. He didn't care about his job. He wanted out. But when he reached the stairs, something else was there. Not the figure. A man, wearing a yellow plastic poncho, soaked to the bone, holding a plastic bag. The man smiled, said something Johan couldn't hear over the storm. Then he raised the bag and handed it to him. Inside, bread, a canned drink, a small container of soup. He said thank you. He said he just wanted to help the kind security guard who let them park. Johan nearly wept. The man stayed with him until morning. They sat inside the guard station, eating quietly. Every so often, Johan glanced at the monitor. Nothing unusual. He didn't tell the man what had happened. He couldn't find the words. At sunrise, the waters began to recede, slowly, like a retreating army. By noon, cars started to leave. Johan stood at the ramp, logging license plates, waving to owners. No one asked about the alarm. No one reported a broken window. No one said anything about staying in their car overnight. And then she came, an old woman, frail, short, draped in a red raincoat. She walked slowly to a silver sedan, the same one from the night before, the one with the figure. She didn't look at Johan. She didn't speak. She just got into her car and drove away. Do you have a terrifying tale of your own? Send your story to officialmrsSinister@gmail.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. Sleep tight if you can. And remember, the things lurking in the dark are always watching.